Hi, this is a recorded lecture for DP-DT topic 4.2a, metals and alloys. First thing to understand that metals are typically hard and shiny with good electrical and thermal conductivity. Most are too soft or brittle by themselves, so mixing them with another material element can help make them more useful. Designed for disassembly and the recovery of metals through recycling makes the use of metals more sustainable and have a longer useful life. Now, first thing to understand, and we just went over this definition, that a metal is a solid material that's typically hard, shiny, malleable, fusible, ductible, has good thermal and electrical conductivity. You're used to seeing some of these, like iron is a metal, gold is a metal, silver is a metal, aluminum is a metal, and there's alloys such as steel. Other metals you may know, I don't know if you know, like potassium is a metal, sodium is a metal, lithium is a metal. There are more metals than nonmetals, and most metals that you encounter in your daily life are actually alloys. It's pretty rare that you encounter a pure metal in its elemental form. So basically, an alloy is a mixture that contains at least one metal. This can be a mixture of metals and a mixture of metals and nonmetals. So for instance, copper and tin give you bronze. And so this is a bronze statue. It's made out of copper and tin. Steel is an alloy. Steel is an alloy between iron and carbon. But again, you rarely see metals in their elemental form. I think the one that you probably most commonly would come across would be copper. So copper looks like this. You know, copper wiring is the probably the most common one that you would come across. Maybe silver, and of course gold if you have pure gold, but most gold that is made into jewelry is actually an alloy of like silver and gold or platinum and gold. Superalloys are alloys that exhibit excellent mechanical strength, resistance to thermal creep, deformation, and good surface stability and resistance to corrosion. So, for instance, it's the kind of metal that you would want to use in a jet airplane engine, because it's going to have that excellent mechanical strength, it's going to resist deformation, it's going to have a resistance to corrosion. So it's the kind of metal that, like I said, you would put into an airplane engine. Let's understand how we get metals. So for instance, an ore is a naturally occurring solid material. An ore is a natural occurring material from which a metal or valuable mineral can be extracted profitably. So for instance, bauxite is an aluminum ore, malachite is a copper ore, hematite would be an iron ore. And these are essentially rocks with a lot of metal in them, and you can therefore extract the metal. All rocks are going to have some trace amount of metal, but to remove the metal, trace amounts of those metals, it might cost more than the value that you're getting out of them. So you need to actually have a rock that has a large percentage of the metal in it so that you can extract value from that. Once you've extracted the ore, you need to go through the smelting process. And in the smelting process, you are going to extract metal from the ore in a process involving heat and melting. And so you can watch these videos and they're going to show you how that happens. I want to talk about value change, the process or activities by which a company adds value to an article, including production, marketing, and the provision of after-sales services. So generally, and if we're thinking in our internationally minded way, the most value comes from the people who process and refine and end up selling a mineral or a metal compared to the people who extract it. So often less economically developed countries are involved in the extraction, and more economically developed countries end up the lion's share of the profits when they refine and sell the actual product from the ores that are being extracted. And this happens all the time. Let's talk about the structure of metals. So the structure of metals, they form lattice crystalline structures. And so here's some examples of those. We have cubic and hexagonal. So those are lattice structures. And basically they're repeating forms. If you think of salt crystals, they're little cubes, and they're a lattice structure also. So salts generally form lattice crystalline structures. If you think of a quartz crystals are hexagonal. And so they're going to form this hexagonal quartz structure right here. And metals do the same thing. They form crystalline structures, so repeating shape. This leads us to this idea of grain sizes. Metals are crystalline structures comprised of individual grains, and the grain size can vary and be determined by heat treatment, particularly how quickly the metal is cooled. So quick cooling results in small grains. Slow cooling results in large grains. Grain size in metals can affect the density, the tensile strength, and the flexibility of the metal. And if you think about this, this makes sense. Crystals take time to grow. So if you let a metal cool slowly, the crystals can grow bigger. If you let a metal cool quickly, then the grains just don't have time to grow, and therefore they're smaller. Different grain sizes are caused by multiple growth sites, and those are called nucleation sites. These variations in crystal growth are affected by temperature inhomogeneities in the cooling metal. Now, let's talk about what happens with grain size. So a variety of grain size is determined by heat treatment. Preheating metal or alloys allows the grains to change their structure. Slow cooling forms larger grains. We just talked about that. Rapid cooling quenches, forms smaller grains. Directional properties can be formed by selective cooling in one area of the metal or the solid. And this is how grain size affects the properties. So if you want something that's got a lot of tensile strength, you're going to want coarse grains. So coarse means larger grains, and you're going to get a stronger metal. Toughness will also be determined by larger, coarser grains. So that would be slower cooling. Ductibility, you want coarse grains, so larger grains, and you're going to get a more ductile metal. Brittle or hard, because those two things generally go together, you're going to want smaller grain sizes. So for instance, a knife edge, you want that to be hard, and therefore you're going to want smaller grains, and that's going to be a more brittle, harder metal. If you want flexibility and malleability, you're going to want coarse grain size, and this will give you a more malleable metal. This is one of my favorite shows. I'm kind of nerdy. It's called Forged in Fire, and they make knives and swords and axes and all those kinds of things in a competition. And this is what you call a quench. So this guy has a sword or something like that, and he has put it into oil to quench it quickly so that it forms smaller grains, so that you have a harder edge on that sword or knife or whatever he's quenching there. Tempering is a heat treating process designed to increase the toughness of an iron-based metal by heating it and allowing it to cool in air. Tempering decreases the hardness of the material, which usually increases the ductility and decreases the brittleness. And Japanese, like samurai swords, are really interesting that way. The edge is very hard and brittle, but the spine, the back part of the, so this is the edge down here, the sharp part, and this part right here is the back of the sword, and that has a coarser grain size. So you differentially cool a samurai sword, and that's actually what makes them curve, so that you get a hard edge and a more malleable but tougher spine. Work hardening is also known as strain hardening or cold working, and this is the process of toughening a metal through plastic deformation. And so if you remember back from the physical properties of materials, plastic deformation is when you change the shape of a material kind of permanently. And so watch this video. It's really good. It shows you what that looks like. But essentially, if you take a hanger, a metal hanger, and you bend it, you have work hardened part of that hanger at the bend. It's actually much more difficult to straighten that bend. And the same thing happens with a paper clip. If you bend a paper clip, you have hardened the part that you just bent, so that it is actually more difficult to straighten that out as compared to bending a different part of the paper clip or hanger. I want to talk about how alloys make metals harder, essentially, or they change the properties of metals in lots of different ways. So let's say that this is the lattice structure of a metal, and you can see this is an elemental metal. If this was, for instance, iron, these would be all iron atoms here that you're looking at. And they're easier to dislocate the structure of the lattice. So when you apply a mechanical property to this, like compression or tensile forces, or you're bending it, it's going to dislocate the different atoms. And basically this is what that looks like. You're going to get something called a slip plane, and the atoms will actually kind of propagate little slips along the slip plane. And you can see that process here, that there's a space here, and now it's here, and now it's here. And that's going to cause plastic deformation. If you can interrupt that by adding another type of atom in there, then it's harder for that slip plane to propagate. So for instance, these are maybe some carbon atoms in iron atoms, and this is going to make it harder to actually cause that slip plane to continue. And it's going to make that plastic deformation harder to propagate through the metal. And so that's how alloying works. You can watch this video right here. It's about alloying properties. I would highly recommend that you watch that. Let's compare alloys to pure metal. So alloys increase strength and hardness. Alloys reduce malleability and ductility. So this is compared to pure metals. This is due to the presence of foreign atoms, which interfere with the movement of the atoms in the crystals during plastic deformation. So they essentially block the plastic deformation, that slip plane. They block it from propagating. There are lots of ferrous alloys, and these contain iron. You can watch this video to just get a sense of what iron is and how it is alloyed. Non-ferrous, by the way, contains no iron. So one of the first alloys of iron that you should probably know is mild steel. The carbon content of mild steel is pretty low. It's 0.1 to 0.03, and the iron content is 99%. And it's used for engineering purposes in general and non-specialized metal products. Stainless steel is an alloy, and this is made up of iron and nickel and chromium. It resists staining and corrosion and is therefore used for the likes of cutlery and surgical instruments. It also resists oxidation, which is corrosion. It's a good choice if you're doing something that gets exposed to water a lot or is in a marine environment. Cast iron is going to have a carbon content of 2 to 6%, so an iron content of 94 to 98%. It's very strong, but it's brittle. It can be cast in sand molds and manufactured items such as engine blocks and cookware and manhole covers. These are all cast iron. And this is a video that shows you that process. We can talk about non-ferrous alloys. So aluminum is an element, but you can form alloys with copper and manganese, and it's very lightweight and easy to work. It's used in airplanes and aircrafts, windows, frames, kitchenware, things like that. So aluminum alloys are generally what you encounter. When you have a Coke can, it's an aluminum alloy. Bronze is another alloy that we should know. It's a non-ferrous alloy of copper and tin, and you can think of the Bronze Age. It's used mostly today for shipping and statuaries and areas where iron oxidation is a problem. And this is an old bronze sculpture from thousands of years ago. And it's still, it's got some oxidation on there, but it's still in really good condition. Brass is a combination of copper and zinc, and it usually has the proportions of about 65 to 35% respectively, and we use it for ornamental purposes, instruments, and electrical fittings. Silver alloys. Generally, what we're going to do is mix together silver and copper, and this creates something called sterling silver, and it's used for decorative items in jewelry and ornaments, and also in solder for soldering different metals together. This is an interesting kind of case study. It's called Damascus steel, and just have a read through this. And it's named after the city of Damascus, but it's pretty famous for mixing together different types of steel, and you get these really beautiful patterns with it. And it was actually forgotten how people made Damascus steel until recently, where people have just experimented and are now making Damascus steel again. All right, thank you for watching.